My name is David Houlbrooke. I am from AGResearch in New Zealand, and I am a soil scientist with a keen research interest in dairy effluent management. I have come here to Uruguay to investigate current effluent management practices in Uruguay and think about where there may be areas for improvement, and to share my story with my experiences and New Zealand's experiences, the New Zealand dairy industry experience in dairy effluent management, and to perhaps see where there may be some areas that could be of use for Uruguay as it looks to improve and go forward with effluent management. So first of all, I want to share a brief history of what has happened in New Zealand with regards to dairy effluent management. So until 1991, most New Zealand dairy farmers had 2-pond treatment systems. This was the recommended management approach. But in 1991, there was a change in government legislation with the introduction of a Resource Management Act, which discouraged land treatment pond systems and preferred land application. Okay, so before 1991, when all dairy farmers were using treatment ponds, we had lots of problems with nutrients going directly from the pond into drains, and then the drains would lead to waterways. And we were seeing increased pollution coming from fecal microbes, phosphorus, nitrogen, ammonium, and ammonium is more toxic to fish, and so we had problems in our local rural streams affecting the water quality from the effluent. So New Zealand then moved more to land application from 1990 onwards. But when we moved to land application, most dairy farmers did not use their treatment ponds anymore and went to what we call daily application, where the effluent was applied every day to the field from a small sump, and say they did not use their 2-pond treatment systems for storage. Over the next 10 years, we found that land application had a big improvement in water quality compared to discharging 2-pond systems, but at times we were still causing some pollution from our land application. This was particularly in winter or spring when our soils were wet and we applied effluent on the top of the soil, and we would get runoff or drainage still occurring. So after some research, we determined that we actually needed pond storage during these wet times so that the effluent could be put into a pond and held back until it was safer conditions to apply the effluent. The research demonstrated this, and also that we had some irrigation equipment which sometimes was very fast and the soil infiltration rate could not keep up. And so by using lower rate application sprinkler type systems, it was a better match for the infiltration rate of the soil and less likely to cause runoff and leaching. So the combination of these two techniques was picked up by the New Zealand dairy industry and by regional councils who are responsible for our policy making, and farmers have been taking these approaches up very steadily to be operating at good practice and help eliminate the runoff of effluent nutrients into waterways. Okay, now I would like to explain to the Uruguay audience how all the different parties that have an interest in dairy effluent management in New Zealand, what roles and responsibilities they have, what functions, and how do people work together. So starting off with the New Zealand government, the government is responsible for high-level policy such as the Resource Management Act, which determines that New Zealanders need to take care of environmental effects. And they watch that regional councils are working to create policy that will help eliminate those environmental effects. So it actually is the regional council's responsibility to create the policy specific for their region. In New Zealand there are 16 different regional councils who have to take into consideration the local conditions of their large catchments, and also the environment, economic and social implications of policies. These councils, they have to work collaboratively with the community to create policy that hopefully most people agree with. But they have the function that if they cannot get agreement, they can put in policy through regulatory and environment court processes. The preferred option is to work collaboratively and get agreement on the direction that policy needs to be taken. We also have an organisation called Dairy New Zealand, who are the dairy industry good body. So they represent the New Zealand dairy industry, and they are a very important part of this process. So they work together in the policy space with the regional councils and help advise the dairy industry's position on policy going forward. They also need to be very aware of the needs of their industry, and they need to create strategic aims for the continual improvement of their industry. They spend a lot of time working with farmers, providing impartial technical advice, and a lot of extension material in basic management guides for the farmers of how to operate good management practice that will meet the regional council policies outcomes. Because the regional councils, they focus on the outcome, not the method to get there. So the Dairy NZ are largely responsible for helping with what good methods will be to achieve regional council outcomes. The dairy industry is funded through New Zealand farmers on a levy on production, and this helps them implement research to gain new knowledge to help some of the scientific research gaps that are needed to go forward as well. AGResearch is a New Zealand government-owned research institute which is responsible for carrying out research aiming to look at questions provided by the community needs. So we provide technical advice, undertaking research often asked for by central government or the industry, such as Dairy NZ. We are often funded through either industry or the central government, and we also offer our advice on existing knowledge to the community to help provide technical solutions, impartial technical solutions to the problems. Finally, there is another key player now called effluent service providers that are an important part of the story for farmers, because they need to know that there are trusted salesmen of equipment that can come in and provide the right solutions for the problem that they have. So we have accredited service providers, so they gain their accreditation through the dairy industry from Dairy NZ, and they need to follow a code of practice which has been developed to help guide all of the aspects of best practice that need to be considered on a farm-by-farm basis. And so the effluent service providers are an important part of the solution for the farmers. In New Zealand, as we carried the journey forward, moving from two-pond treatment systems through to good management practice, we learnt some lessons along the way. One of those lessons was that we did not include pond storage as part of our effluent management for a start off. So we moved away from treatment ponds directly to land application, which meant that we had problems at wet times of the year with effluent runoff. So we fixed a large part of the problem, but not all of the problem. And at certain times of the year and on some soil types and climates, the risk was still quite high. So quite a lesson learnt was that we then had to go back and put some storage into our facilities and improve the nature of some of our irrigation systems to make them handle the conditions that we were applying land application to, so that we could know that we were taking the effluent, applying it to land at safe times and in a method that we could keep the effluent in the root zone. So really, for me, a key message is that whole root zone concept. The effluent needs to be put in the root zone where it is no longer a contaminant for pollution, but actually it's now a fertilizer for plant uptake. This is a key issue that I am now looking at with Uruguay and thinking, how can we move Uruguay from having lots of discharging to pond systems where the nutrients are being sent to the waterways or are not being utilised, to better capture of those nutrients, put on farms where farmers can use the nutrients for their fertiliser value. I see that as a very important potential outcome to be looked for. In New Zealand, we find that we get the best environmental effect by actually trying to get the best agronomic performance out of our effluent.